In this video, we're going to unwrap this tomato pin cushion along with this pin. One of the things we're going to cover is what if you want more than one object to share an unwrap. It's possible. One of the ways that you can make game models run more efficiently in an engine is if multiple objects share the same unwrapping texture, so that the game engine only has to load one texture versus multiple textures. So this tomato, if it was in a game, let's say we're making a fun little sewing game, and this is like a background object, would most likely always be in the same scene as this pin object. So putting them on the same unwrap would make some sense. So let's work on that. Obviously, the most easiest one to unwrap is going to be this pin. So let's start with unwrapping that. First things first, let's delete the history, freeze the transform, all those fun things. Next, I'm going to go to UV and open my UV editor, and let's take a look at what we got. So, since I did make it with a cylinder primitive, it did keep that a little bit. Honestly though, I don't really like it. I guess it could work. It might be a good starting point, at least for this part of it. So let's keep that. We'll start with that. So I'm going to select this. That's a nice beginner thing. And then I'm going to do a unfold on it. Maybe an optimize. And that's probably good enough for that portion. It's a little tiny bit stretched, but in the long scheme of things, it's not that bad. Let's do the top of the head. I'm sorry, top of the pin then, the pin head. And let's take a look at what we got. So this one by default is not going to work, where it's basically just this top here and everything else is kind of stretched underneath it. So what we can do is we can add some cuts to this and then do just a nice unfold on it and let it pull itself apart. So I'm going to select these edges right there. Probably also on the other side, like that. And I'm going to cut those. And let's do an unfold and see what we get. So if I do an unfold, optimize, it's a little bit stretched. This approach might not be the best. So let me do another approach with this. I'm going to instead break this apart in half. And that's kind of what you might end up doing when you unwrap things, is as you go, you might find that your approach is not the greatest and you might need to kind of change gears in the middle. So I'm just selecting half of this. Control-Shift-X to detach it. And then I'm going to do an unfold optimize on these. And that's not looking too bad. I can always, just so I don't lose these, reattach them here. Cut so, move and so. So it's kind of reattached. I do probably also want to kind of attach it to the top here, again, just so I don't lose it. The only issue is if I do this, it's going to cause some problems. So watch. Cut so, move and so. We can see that it stretched it, and it's kind of really awkward because these are now two different textile densities because of some of the stuff that we did to them. So one thing I could do is, if I do want to do something like that, is I can select one of these objects and I can get its textile density, and then I can set that other object's textile density so that it'll be a little bit easier for me to do this. So let's do it here. Let's see if this will look okay. I don't know if I want to do that. It's you see how it's kind of overlapping naturally. I guess I could even just do this. Let's do So, and so we can easily kind of reattach part of it. Let's do another optimize. I'm just clicking it a bunch of times and it kind of smooths it out, and that's not too bad. There we go. You do have to sometimes just kind of click optimize. And we have the pin. All right, nice, all done. Let's keep the pin to the side. We'll deal with that pin later. That one was nice and quick. Let's move on to the tomato. And what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to hide this pin while I work on unwrapping this tomato, because this one's going to take up a lot more space. It's going to need a lot more room on my viewport. I don't want to accidentally click that pin while I'm working. So we'll do that. Okay, let's open it up and see what we have to start with. And oof! Since I did start with a sphere, and I think I did this one with a plane, it's not a beautiful place to start. Let's see. So I can at least possibly use this to help me separate pieces. So this is the big tomato piece. Let's move that away. And this is that big star piece. And it's pretty messy down there too. You see that? This is pretty gross looking. Let's begin with fixing the star piece. That's going to be the easiest piece. So what I will usually do when I have something, you know, a new UV set, is I do like to get rid of the seams that are currently there. So what I'm going to do is select those faces on the UVs. I'm going to do UV, I'm going to do a planar. And the obvious axis to do this on is going to be the y-axis, since this is kind of facing top down. So I'm going to hit apply. I'm going to close it. And let's see, it's not too bad. We got a little bit of stretching going on, and we might be able to fix that. One thing I can try first, just to see how bad it is, I can unfold optimize this. That is actually, you know, pretty acceptable. That doesn't look too bad. One of the things that we can use to also help us are some of these different settings up here. I don't know if you've tried to play around with some of these. First, you know, this is kind of our default one, this wireframe display. We have this one here, the shaded, and what this one does is it makes sure that we don't have any overlapping UVs or UVs that are kind of, are reversed compared to what they are. So for instance, I didn't mean to do that. I always do that by accident. Let me fix that. Oh, not that way. If we start like grabbing and pulling them over, we can see that we start to get things that indicate that we have overlapping UVs. You see that? Like right there. If we accidentally also had this flipped, we can see it's telling us that this is backwards from the way it probably needs to be, so we can flip it back. So that's this one right here. This one is also going to be super handy, and this kind of helps tell us if we have any UV distortion, like stretching. So if sometimes you have issues with that checkerboard, you know, judging it, this one can be a little bit more helpful, where we can see, you know, it's actually telling us that this is done. There's no stretching on it. Let me undo some of those that we did before we go back a little bit. Oh, there's a good one. Okay. Major issues. You see that? Let's replanar that. Better. It's not quite as colored with the red and the blue, but we can see we're having stretching issues in there. So then when we do our unfold optimize, we can see that it's less. You'll very rarely on organic shapes have it be perfect. Like, don't anticipate when something is more round that you're going to have a perfectly not colored shape. But for me, like, that says that that's not too bad. Especially over here, if we look at it, it basically none. We can see on the tomato though how much it is colored, especially over here, and it's a little bit red on in the middle. So this needs a lot of work. You really see the red here. So let me turn that back off. That could be really distracting. And let's work on this. So I'm going to do the same thing. I don't like how this is. I don't like where any of those seams are, especially along the top and the bottom. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to go to UV. I'm going to planar it. I'm going to do it from the side though. And we end up with something like this to start from. So round shapes, especially spherical shapes, we're going to find that we're probably going to need more cuts than just one. I'm going to start with just one though, kind of splitting this in half. So if I double click, it's going to select it on one side all the way to the middle. I'm then going to do a cut. And then let's see what happens if we unfold and optimize with just one cut. So unfold and optimize. I can optimize all day, but I'm still going to have this very strange shape. So it's probably very nice here, but very ugly here. Let's just do the checkerboard pattern for this one. So, ooh, that is not nice. Not even close. So one cut, not enough. Ooh, I forgot to do something. Let me just double check that I did this on this. I know I did it on the pin, but I might have forgot to do it on that. Nope, okay. Let's do another cut. Let's cut it right down the center. So I'm going to double click. I'm going to cut that, and now we can unfold those and start optimizing them. And we can see it's getting better. It's better than it was originally, but we're still having some problems. Depending on where we need to put, what the texture looks like, one of the things we could consider would be to put a cut right down the middle. I'm going to show you what it looks like, but ultimately I don't think I want to do this, but just for the sake of showing you how well it can help. It's very clean now. Like, this would probably be good enough, kind of splitting it up like this. The reason I don't want to do this though, I'm kind of thinking ahead of how would I want to texture this. And this is a pin cushion, so this is going to be made out of cloth. So this is going to be, a cloth texture, like going from here to here. And I really don't want to deal with a seam right there. Like, that's going to be really hard to deal with. It's going to be pretty ugly to have a weird seam in the middle, or it's going to be really hard to try to fix that in Substance Painter. So I'm going to undo that because, yeah, it did make a very nice, not stretched, but it's going to be really hard for me to texture that. So instead, I'm going to add some more cuts this way. So I'm going to double click on these here. I'm going to cut those. Let's do another unfold optimize and all those. And if we take a look, that's not bad. Those are looking pretty good. I am kind of hiding them also in these creases. Like, I wouldn't want to do it on these where it's kind of like in the middle. That would cause problems. It would make sense to put them in the crease. One of the ways that you can think about where to put your UV seams is If you've ever sewn before, like clothing or even like stuffed animals for fun, is where would you put a seam on this if we were actually trying to make this out of cloth? Because it's very similar. We would be cutting this out, out of cloth like a pattern, and then we'd be putting this on a sewing machine and stitching it back together where all of these seams are. And if we were to create this, for real, this is probably where the seams would be, is right there in the crease. So it makes a lot of sense that ultimately that's where they ended up. And that's all we really need to do for this one. So let's make sure that these are uniform. So I'm going to select these. Actually, we can just do it this way. I'm going to get its textile density for that one, and let's set the textile density for those, just to make sure that we are uniform. Next, I am going to put this on here. Like I want to start packing it. So I'm going to go to my layout. And for this one, it's pretty organic that I think I'm going to actually turn on the rotate shells to rotate every degree. And then I'm going to hit apply. And let's see what we get. This one might take a little bit longer. We can see it processing because it is trying each piece, rotating it 360 times. And you can, with each other, so you can do the math on that one of how long it might take to pack. I hear my CPU fans firing up. And there we go. I don't know if you can hear the fans on the recording. It should stop in a second. All right. And that packed them pretty nicely. If I am concerned about, I do need them oriented a certain way for texturing, I could do that, but I'm probably just going to have it be a very generic cloth on there that doesn't necessarily need a specific direction. And since the seams are there, I would possibly have like a special darker line there anyway. So I'm not too concerned about, these being rotated like this. While I'm here, remember, I do plan to put that pin on here, and we need to make sure that the UVs of that pin have the same textile density as this. So even though they are two separate objects, they're going to be in the same scene and they're related to each other. So we can't have one have a different textile density. So I'm going to pick one of these. I'm going to get its textile density. I'm then going to go select the pin. So let's go, I'm going to unhide it, select that pin, and then I'm going to set it to that same textile density. So it got a lot smaller. That's good. It should, because in comparison to the tomato, it's not nearly as big. So what we can do is I can actually select both of these at the same time. Same thing as multiple selection, but if you have your UVs open, it will show them both. I can then just grab this, and I can find a clean space on here to drop it in. So now, if I were to texture this, I could texture the tomato in that space, and I can texture the pin in this space. And if I put both, I'll put the same texture on both, it'll texture both at the same time. And again, you might be looking at this and saying, oh no, but that's not taking up enough space. I want to scale it a lot bigger. Resist the urge, because we do need to keep the textile density consistent. What we might be able to do is we could possibly come in and tweak these just a little bit. For the sake of the length of the video though, I'm not going to do that. I probably might touch them a little just to see if I can get a little more space out of them. But I think this looks pretty good. I might just kind of bump these out just to give this more room. But I think we did a pretty good job of taking up the space. So this does follow our 3 rules. 1, consistent textile density. 2, using up as much of our UV space as we possibly can. And 3, we gave everything enough breathing room to not cause any problems when it comes over into Substance Painter. So hopefully this was helpful and you had a fun time following along.